Welcome to Hungry Hearts Church in Jackson, Tennessee. My name is Barbara Dickerson. I'm an elder in Corinth and for the Hungry Hearts Church. I want to thank you for joining us today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Passover. 'Tis the month to do this. And so I'm just going to review a little bit about Passover and how it went along back in the day and how we kind of do it today. So as we know, in Exodus 12, in the very first verse, the Lord said to Moses, "This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you." Now, this verse shows us how important this event is. And at the time, it was important for Israel, but now that we've been grafted in, it's important for us in this day and time, because it marks the returning to what the Lord had wanted their path to be. So before this, they had pretty much been a tribe of wanderers. And then they were a tribe of immigrants because they went to Egypt and they were new there, and Joseph was there, and he started them on their 400-year journey in Egypt, which then turned them into being slaves. But now God has already set them up to be a nation. So they're going to get their own calendar, which is very important, because if you know anything about histories, then it's pretty much as each ancient nation or groups of nations would conquer somebody, they would impose their own rules, times, beliefs onto that nation, and so that they would all be on the same calendar. But now God's going to give them their own. This will also mark their independence. And as I was saying before, it marks their birth as a nation. And like our calendar, it is marked into two parts: before Christ and the year of our Lord, which is there from year 1 to now, 2024. So basically, their calendar at that time was before Passover and after Passover. Their faith in God's promise and obedience in His commands would result in their deliverance and freedom. And just as the Passover marked the birth of a nation, so when we accept Christ, we are born again. Our lives can also be divided into two parts. The first part is marked by slavery to sin, bondage to the world. Then Christ delivers us from our sin, and He sets us free. He gives us a future. He makes us born again into this world. And everything changes, or it should. The old has passed away, and the new has become. Our spiritual journey with God begins. Our born again day is our spiritual birthday. Day 1 on our new calendar. And if you have been born again already, think back and thank God for the day and the changes He has made in your life. So in Exodus 12:5, He says every person, household, had to have their own lamb, and that each person would eat of it. And they must repent of their sins, and then they laid that on the lamb, because that lamb was going to die for their sin at that time. So in like manner, each person now must repent of their own sin and trust Jesus personally. And then in Exodus 12:46, it mentions that no bones can be broken. So let's see, that is... It must be eaten inside the house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break any of its bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. Well, as we know, in John 19, 31 through 36, when Jesus was on the cross, none of his bones were broken either. Now, normally in a crucifixion, they broke the leg bones of the person who was on the cross. This was so they could not hold themselves up, and once they were in the position of not being able to hold themselves up, they literally suffocated to death. But since Jesus did give up his life, he was on there for several hours, but he did give up his life. They did the sword in the side, which released his blood and his water. Now, no bones were broken, not even when they put the nails in his hands. Back to the original Exodus. All signs of the Lamb should be gone by morning. Well, Jesus was taken down off of the cross before nightfall, which was unusual because normally they didn't do that. And since the next day was a Sabbath and they could not touch a body on a Sabbath, then everything miraculously turned out exactly how it needed to be. He was taken off the cross, he was prepared and put in the tomb. No bones broken, everything exactly as it needed to be, and it had been prophesied. Part of the Passover, more on the night to be much observed, they were to eat in haste. Now, the reason they were to eat in haste is because during the Exodus, God told Moses to make sure that they were all dressed to go the moment he said go. You know, you couldn't run back to get your toothbrush. You had to go. Just go. Keep your sandals on. Have your staff in your hand. Be ready to go. Because even a day of delay would have mean they would have stayed in Egypt and not been freed. In a similar manner, salvation is urgent. You must make haste to believe while there is still an opportunity. The blood of the lamb was to be displayed publicly when they killed that lamb. You marched your little lamb up there to the priest. He laid his hand on that lamb's head. You laid your hand on top of the priest's hand, and you confessed your sins. And then he cut its throat, which we all go gooey over now these days because we're not used to animal husbandry. And then the blood of the lamb had to be put on the doorposts so that the angel of death would bypass them. We symbolically wear the blood of Christ when we give ourselves over to him on the posts of our heart. And this is to be a reminder of the faith and obedience of everyone that embraces Christ. We must embrace him and follow his commandments to honor him, to show our faith that he's going to deliver us from the evil one. The blood showed that they had made the sacrifice and were under God's protection. So when we give ourselves over to the Lord for his death on the cross, we are under God's protection. And so that's also why he bled in front of everybody there on the cross, especially like when they stuck that sword in him, blood and water gushed out of him. Now, having been a nurse, I know 99.9% of the time somebody passes away, if you were to stick a sword in their side, nothing would be gushing out. Nothing. There's nothing there to gush. The heart's not beating. Everything goes to a still. In 4 minutes, your blood is clotted. There's nothing to gush. His blood cleanses those who trust in him. If you have ever truly trusted in him, you will see the miracles he will perform in your life. They may not be big miracles, but they're miracles nonetheless. They're little miracles, big miracles. Was that a miracle? Oh, wait, yes it was. And we have to embrace these things that he does for us and acknowledge them. Jesus died during the festival of Passover, like the Passover lamb did. On the night before Jesus died, Jesus was observing the Passover with his disciples. Passover itself is not a holy day. However, the next day is. And we refer to it as the night to be much observed. And it's also the first day of unleavened bread. So that is actually the holy day. Passover is just what it says. It's the day that we were passed over for death. During the Passover, God wanted people to remember, his people to remember what he had done for them. So he made it a time when they must always observe. Now, Jesus did do a few things different during the Passover, because as they were eating, he kind of added to that festival. In Luke 22:19, he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." So right there, he's telling you exactly what he wants you to remember of him. And he's making it a very, very important date for you all to remember. Everyone, forget Christmas. This is the day he wants you to remember. In Matthew 26:28, he says, "For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." And then Luke 22:19, "And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" So that was 3 of his disciples that marked the occasion in the Word because it was so important. As Jesus was eating the unleavened bread, he told them that it now represented his body and the drink represented his blood. Before they remembered the Exodus, now they were to remember Jesus. The original Passover pointed to and prepared the way for Jesus. He is the once for all time Passover lamb. He is the unifying element which connects the Old Testament and the New Testament in a way. Every time we partake of the Lord's Supper, we are celebrating the Passover. Not the Passover in Egypt, but the big one, the Passover that Jesus prepared by dying for us. The connection to the Lamb. Did you notice as we read through the chapter, I know it was kind of hit miss here, but if you'll read it, it all flows together. How long they were to keep the lamb before they killed it? In verse 3, it says, "Tell the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight." Now, I had never noticed this before. I've known this for a while that it did say that, but prior to my knowing, I had never noticed it. And I have to say that it was pointed out to me in this very church that it was even there. That, they had to select the best, perfect lamb from the flock, and then they had to keep it in their house for 4 days. Well, have you ever bought a puppy or a kitten? Pretty much after the first 24 hours, you're stuck like glue to that animal. It's not going anywhere. You're going to do everything you can for it. It's your baby. Some translations actually say to take care of it for that amount of time. Why is that? Why would he say that? Because you know how we are when we even if we get a goldfish, we get attached to the thing. If it dies in 24 hours, we're like, oh, good grief, I got to go buy another one because my kid's going to have a come apart when he comes home and there's no goldfish. So, that's just sort of how we are. So you have to think, well, what was God's thinking on this? What was this going to accomplish? Well, by requiring the families to care for the lamb separately from the flock for 4 days, it would help them to realize that this sacrifice was personal. Because, you get attached. And I've raised puppies in the past. I used to show dogs. And, when they're little babies, you know that you're going to, sell most of those puppies, if not all of them. So you're evaluating them and you're looking at them for 8 weeks. And at the end, you're either going to keep a puppy for yourself or you're going to have to let them go. But you always have a favorite puppy in that litter. You're going to always have a favorite puppy in that litter. And that is always the one that you're really not going to want to let go. And that's what this whole purpose was. Even though I showed dogs for a living and I bred dogs for a living, or not a living, but as part of that, I still got attached to those puppies, even though I knew I was going to have to let them go. They would, how you see a personality in a puppy or a kitten or a lamb. Yeah, it was going to be hard. And the other thing was, when I had a puppy and I sold it to somebody, I wasn't thinking they're going to go take it home and, kill it. But this is what they were going to do. They knew taking that animal into their house what the end game was. It was going to be sacrificed for their sins. And the lamb sacrifice was directly connected to their own deliverance. And they were going to be the ones that basically delivered that death blow. God designed this entire ritual to point to Yeshua. Just as those lambs were a personal sacrifice for individuals, so Yeshua is a personal sacrifice for each one of us. Jesus did not die for a bunch of nameless, faceless people. He died for every one of us. Because you remember, he's not on a linear timeline like we are. He could see us in the future. And he didn't just die for the world in general. He died for me. He died for Edith and Bill and Cindy and Chris. He died for all of us. Anyone who asks for forgiveness of their sins and truly means it and truly repents, you need to insert your name there. And just as those people killed the lamb, so are we responsible for Yeshua's death. We were not there, but our sins were put him there. People like us nailed him there. Like the Passover lamb, Jesus lived in and among them before they turned on him and killed him. So if you think about some of the sins you're most ashamed of, those are usually the ones that nobody even knows about, then that is why he had to die. Those sins put him there. That's the difference between, him and the Passover lamb. Passover lamb could not choose his fate. Jesus did choose his. He gave up his life to bring us out of slavery to sin. He gave up his life to bring us freedom. He knew what it was going to cost, and he went willingly. He did it because he loves us. He did it because he wants to cleanse us so that we might receive salvation. So we have to have a personal connection to the Lamb. He is just not a sacrifice for the world. He is your Passover lamb. He must be the sacrifice for you and for your sins specifically. You must come to him, ask him to save you, admit that you cannot save yourself. In verse 12 through 13, God explains to Moses, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments." Now, says all the gods, that's a little g's. And then just in case you aren't real familiar with the plagues, they had a god in Egypt for every one of those plagues. They had the god that looked like a frog. They had the god that looked like, sorry, I'm going blank here, crickets, that sort of thing. They had gods that looked like every one of those. Snakes. So when he says he would destroy all those gods, it's exactly what he did. He showed that he was above them when he defeated each one of them. The people who believed in God and obeyed his commands would be conserved. The people who did not believe in God and did not obey his commands would be condemned. Their gods would prove powerless. Their hope in other means of salvation would be dashed, and they would be judged. This will be the same fate of all those who do not come to Yeshua, the Lamb of God, for forgiveness of sins. So the Passover is memorialized in Exodus. And a lot of people think, well, we don't need to do that anymore because we're not Jewish, and we're not in the desert anymore. So why should we even pay any attention to it? It's done away with. But that's not really what he says. He says we're grafted in. Well, we're grafted in not only to a religion, we're grafted into a race of peoples. And if you look at all the different peoples who are Jewish, you would be very surprised. There are groups in Africa. They are black people. There are groups of people in India, and they look Indian. And these people haven't just suddenly converted to this. They've been there for millennia. They've been there for a long time, practicing exactly like all the Jewish people did all that time. They're also in Yemen and Iraq and in Europe and the United States. So, yeah, covers a lot of territory. These people have been around for a long time, and they come in a lot of shapes, sizes, and colors. You just have to look, and you will find them. Israel itself has been surprised at the number of different peoples who have been keeping Passover in these different cultures. Totally different cultures than what you would think of as the Jewish culture. So, yes, it's a Memorial Day for all of us that we all need to be observing. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast. The Passover and the Exodus were the most important events in Israel's history. It was their Independence Day. They saw firsthand God's power, God's authority, God's sovereignty, God's rule over nature, his defeat of enemies, and his personal grace and care for his people. But people have short-term memories. It was easy for them to forget what God had done for them and on their behalf. That's why he instituted the Passover, in order so that they would remember. I mean, because if we weren't told to remember certain things and did it year to year to year, nobody would be doing this now. Nobody. Not even the Jewish people They'll be, oh yeah, that was way back when. We don't do that anymore. But it's so that you remember and you appreciate what God has done for you. But when they forgot God, then they would go after the world and idols, which has been proven over and over and over. So this event was important, and God would remind them many, many times of it. Because he would say things like, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Ding, ding, ding. It occurs at least 10 times in Scripture. Once in Exodus, 6 times in Leviticus, once in Numbers, once in Deuteronomy, and once in Psalms. And time and again throughout the Old Testament, God's people look back on the Exodus to remind themselves of God's faithfulness. Read Psalms 29 and 78 sometime. But at other times they forgot. For much of the period of the kings, they did not celebrate the festival. They forgot what God had done for them. Forgetting God's miracles and providence were part of the reason they abandoned their faith, doubted God, and turned to idols. After all, we have seen that God completely destroyed the pagan gods of Egypt, the most powerful nation on earth at the time. What person in their right mind would trust in one of these or a similar failed god or idol instead of the true God? So he commanded them to remember, to protect them from straying. In Deuteronomy 6:12, he says, Then take care lest you forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery. In Psalm 77:11, he says, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. The concept of remembering is very important in the Bible. I found at least 22 commands from God to his people to not forget what he has done for them, and over 200 commands to remember him and his works. God repeats commands many times. He repeats his covenants. He reminds his people of what he has done for them. The same lesson and principles are taught again and again and again. And it doesn't matter if it's in the Old Testament or the New Testament, because they just get repeated. The reason is simple. We are forgetful. We have short-term memories. We forget the good things God has done for us. Other times our memories they twist the facts. You know, they say when you lie that if you say the lie enough, you actually start to believe it. Well, our memories do that about things too. Oh, well, you know, it wasn't that bad. We just thought it was bad at the time, but it really wasn't that bad. Look at how the Israelites would remember their time in Egypt. Numbers 11:5. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melon, leeks, onions, and garlic. Wow, makes Egypt sound great. All that free food. But that was just their memories twisting on them because, you know, they were pretty hot to get out of there. And there was a reason for that. They weren't just lounging around and feasting to their heart's content, but that's what it made it sound like they were doing. They had a serious case of selective memory. And we do the same thing. We forget his mercies. We forget to say thank you and forget the consequences of sin, the guilt, and the shame. When we repeat the same sin again, we forget that we did it before. Or, well, I don't think we forget. I think we kind of just shove it out of our minds. And if there was guilt and shame attached to it, we forget that too. Have you ever, as a child or adult, remember doing something that did not turn out as you expected? It would, and then later on, I don't know, a day, a week, or a year, or years later, you did the exact same thing, only to get the same exact result. And then you're like, oh, good grief, I did this last time. Suddenly you remember that it wasn't really, you did that already, and it didn't work out. And then you're like, how could I forget? So why do we forget? We forget because we don't value something enough. We forget because we don't make the proper effort to remember. Here, God has the people he had them take very specific steps to memorialize this event to ensure they did not forget what God had done. Every aspect of the festival serves a purpose to remind them of some aspect of the Exodus. Time of year, unleavened bread, lamb, bitter herbs. In the time of Joshua, the people made a stone memorial to God when he parted the Jordan River. When you do what you do to make sure you don't forget God's commands or answered prayers or maybe the work in your life, what do you do? What do you do to memorialize that? Well, here are a few ideas. Keep a journal. Include a special thanksgiving, blessings, or answers to prayers inside. Review it from time to time. Don't just write it down and forget it. Throw it in the corner. Record special moments of God's grace in your life with pictures and then make a memorial photo album if you can. You can also do a Thanksgiving tree, which I think is great for kids because it's something they can visualize. Write down and share your testimony with others. The more you talk about God's work in your life, the more you will be aware of it. Yes, you're making other people aware that God has worked in your life, but you're also reminding yourself. Let's go to verse 16, 12:16. No work shall be done on those days. The first and last days of the festival are holy. The people were to rest from their labor and focus fully on God. We also need time to rest from our labors and focus on God. Plan a spiritual retreat for your holy days. Now, the way the Passover is set up, you're going to have Passover, and then the next day you're going to start the first day of unleavened bread. And that's to remind us to get the sin out of our lives. So we eat unleavened bread because again and again in the Word, yeast is associated with sin. And believe me, those days of not having any leavening in your life, it helps you to remember. It helps you to remember your sin and it helps you to remember what you've done and get it out of your life. And I'm telling you, the bread is yummy. There's so many different things you can do with it. And so it's not like you're truly, really suffering from deprivation of bread. But at the same time, the fact that you have to concentrate on it and make sure that you don't eat anything with leavening in it also reminds you every day, every time you eat, why you are not eating leavening in your food. And it's to remind you, Yeshua died to get the sin out of your life so that you would be pure to see the Father. Secular holidays and ways of celebrating often distract us from God. Christmas, Easter. I mean, really, what did all the people this past Easter celebrate? What did they remember? Bunnies, eggs, chocolate? Because that's all I can remember from all the past Easters when I did Easter. It was bunnies, looking for eggs, eating chocolate. I mean, we went to church, but pretty much got the same sermon we got every Sunday. So it wasn't different. With the holy days coming up, consider how you can design your celebration and your family interactions to remind you better of God's work. Here's an example. Have a Rev Shabbat service at your home every Friday night. Light the candles, say the blessings on your wife or your husband or over your children. Read the Bible stories about Yeshua to your children. take communion in your home with your family. And if you can even invite other people to your home and do these things. Taking communion is one of the best ways to remember what Yeshua has done for us. And that is actually what he designed it to do. In Luke 22:19, he says, "And he took bread, and when he gave thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" You don't only have to take Holy Communion at church. You can take it with your Bible study or your Bible group or with your family. In verses 21 through 30 are the ones where were actually obeying the Passover. And God is talking to Moses and Aaron, and he's giving them the instructions. So in 21 he says, Moses then takes those instructions and passes them on to the elders. Moses relays many commands from God to them, starting in verse 21. Then Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go and select lambs for yourselves according to your clans and kill the Passover lamb." Then down to verse 28. Then the people of Israel went and did so. As the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. This is important. The people obeyed God's commands. They observed his commands to the letter. Why did they do this? It's because of faith. They believed in God. They believed in his power. They believed he was going to do what he said. Their faith resulted in obedience. Are there any commands in the world that you have been told were done away with? Is there anything that prevents you from keeping them as a sign of obedience or faith? I'm talking about, those little pesky things in the Old Testament that's done away with. Because this step of obedience was the most important thing they ever did in their lives. Because disobedience would result in death for their firstborn son. God takes obedience seriously. In the Garden of Eden, God tells Adam and Eve that if they disobey and eat the fruit, they will surely die. And they did. The people were not only to obey by keeping the original Passover, they were to keep Passovers in the future. And they were to pass on what they had seen and learned about God to the next generation. One of the reasons God had asked them to continue observing the Passover was to make sure that the future generations would never forget what God had done. Over and over again in the Bible, we see how important it is to pass on the truth when we receive of the things that we've received from God to our own children. Your children's brains are like sponges, soaking in all the information everywhere they look. If you don't fill them, they will get filled elsewhere. Parents, pass the gospel on to your children. Teach them the truths in the Bible and teach them to love the Bible. Now, many people have the prodigal son, but you did your part. You passed it on. So don't think that, I'm going to teach them, and then when they're teenagers, they go do their own thing and they forget everything they seem like they forget everything you said. But in reality, they do remember. And sometimes they will reject it. But I've seen over and over again people that maybe rejected things as teenagers, maybe through their 40s into their 50s. Eventually they come back around most of the time to remembering what they were taught. Because there's nothing like seeing death in your future to remind you what you were taught as a child. In verse 27, the people bowed their heads and worshipped. No one argued with that. No one comes up with other plans. Instead, they submitted to God's plan. They recognized who God is. They have come to know his power, his authority, and his goodness. It was a big time of turmoil And they were having to go through some really hasty preparations. That's why God told them to keep their shoes on, be ready to go when I tell you to go. But before they set off and did it, they worshiped, giving God the glory he deserved. How often do you worship? You can do it every day. If it's just for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. In the car, out of the car, in your living room, in your bedroom. Worship should not be optional if you have time. There's always time to worship. The people were spared, as we see in verses 29 through 30. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. God poured out one of the worst judgments in the history of the world. Now, there are 3 times that I can mention in the Word. This was kind of off the top of my head because I didn't really research it. It's just I remembered it at the time. Where God directly took the lives of a large group of people. There's the flood of Noah's time, Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Passover. All of the previous plagues combined were minor, though, compared to this. Those were temporary. Their effects could be reversed, but this was irreversible. I'm talking about all the death of the firstborn. There was no going back. Pharaoh and the Egyptians had been given not 1 or 2 or 3 chances, but 9. Have you ever given your own kids 9 chances? Because, most people pretty much have worn themselves out by the 3rd. And that was it. There were no more chances. The judgment was final. Death was final. No one was immune. Rich, poor, strong, or weak, it affected every family. And the nobles could not cling to the hope of power, strength, riches, none of that to save them. All their hopes, all their beliefs, all their illusions of safety were dashed in an instant. On the other hand, for God's people, it was different. From the least to the greatest, no matter where they had done in the past, they were spared because they believed and obeyed. Don't you want to be spared at the last trump? The judgment on Egypt is much like the final judgment that every person will face. No one will escape this judgment, rich or poor, powerful or weak. Every person will face God. The judgment decision handed down on that day will be final. Someone may say, God won't give any second chances. In a way, that's correct. There won't be any more chances. But God gives us second chances and third chances and on now. He gives each one of us chances to repent throughout our lives. On that day, those chances will run out. Judgment will be final. The punishment will be irreversible. People's hope and security will prove futile. The only hope is Yeshua. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Those who believe in him will be spared. Those who do not believe in him will be condemned. It's just simply that simple. You say, yes, I believe. And that is good. And that's the first step. So let's look at 4 points based on the passages today. And together they say bros. Now, I actually did not come up with this acronym, but I thought it was a good acronym. So here we go. Believe. There will be a final judgment. It will be far worse than the 10 plagues which God poured out on Egypt. There will be no more chances. The only way to avoid it is to believe and obey and observe. If you have not yet placed your faith in Yeshua, I would invite you to pray right now and put your faith in Him. We also need to remember, most of us today have believed in Yeshua already. Praise the Lord. But our lives get busy. Day after day is filled with the mundane, working, cleaning, preparing food, eating food, and it's filled with stress. And we take our eyes off of Yeshua. We forget or we take for granted what He's done for us. And we forget to read the Word, and which reminds us of what He's done for us. So the lesson for today is don't forget. Write down what God has done for you. Share your testimony. Make memories. Make a memorial. Bring Christ to your festivals, to your fellowships. And we need to obey. Much of modern day church life is very passive. We go to church, we sit, we listen. Sometimes we are absent-minded and we don't even pay attention. We're just there. Sometimes we're listening, but instead of trying to learn with a humble heart, we are looking for points to disagree with or to criticize. Other times we are listening and we think, that was a good sermon. And then we chat for a few minutes and we go home, but we don't really remember the sermon. In one ear, out the other. And even more, do we follow what we learned? What tangible difference has it made in our lives? God called us to be doers of the Word and not hearers only. That means that whenever you study the Bible, in church, in Bible study, or in personal devotion, you should always ask yourself the question, what should I obey? Because as you learn to listen for and to your Master's voice, He will tell you what you should be doing, obeying, and it might contradict what you've been told by pastors and other teachers. Well, this is what happened with me. And that's why I'm here at this church. Start with this sermon and then start making a new habit to ask yourself this question. And you will start to change little by little. Now, you need to also share. So you believe you remember, and you obey. Right. Well, Yeshua's your bro then. We all want to be bros. Why don't we want to be bros with Jesus? I mean, come on. He's the person you want to talk to when you can't talk to nobody else, because He's your good bro. So you want more bros. You want more people to talk to. So you share. Share what God's done for you. Share what God's done for your children. Pass it on. With our physical children, our spiritual children. After asking yourself, what should I obey? You can ask yourself, who can I tell? Make a habit of passing on what you learn from Scripture to others. Share about answered prayer. Share testimonies of God's power at work in your life, and share the gospel. The Passover is about believing, remembering, obeying, and sharing God. Thank you.